Sunbreak is a few months away, and so I want to discuss some things I really want to see in the expansion. Monsters, features, or general improvements I feel could be added. Zamites, Oroctors, Basarios, and Tetsi. What do these monsters have in common? They are the juvenile forms of large monsters from different games. These guys are in Rise, but their adult parents are not. In this case, Zamtrios, Agnacta, Gravios and Tetsukabra are not present in the game right now, despite their child forms being present. This isn't the first time this has happened in Monster Hunter. The Great Jaggy was absent from Monster Hunter Generations, despite Little Jaggy being in the game. And it's also the case for the Great Jagras in Rise. But those are tutorial monsters, while the ones I mentioned are much tougher but also cooler. They have very unique designs, and monsters like Agnacta require unique strategies to beat. So one of my biggest hopes is that these monsters specifically make a return for Sunbreak. Adding their base forms feels like a tease, and I would hate it if we never saw the adult versions. Zamtrios would fit fine in the Frost Islands, Agnacta and Gravios could live in the lava caverns, and Tetsukabra could reside in quite a few maps in this game, including the Citadel. I want Sunbreak to do something with the Apex monsters. At the time this video is recorded, we have Astalos and Shogun Cyanotol revealed as returning monsters, and those two have deviant forms in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. So suffice to say, those guys are probably getting Apex forms, as are Nagakuga and Tigrex. My hope is that Sunbreak does something more with them. Anything. In Rise, they're the final boss of Rampage quests, and are hard monsters in normal quests. You can use their parts to make a single weapon tree, and that's it. They feel like such wasted potential, and that's ignoring how moveset wise, they're just copies of the deviants. Sunbreak could give them armor, or copy the deviant system entirely, and it would be a huge improvement. I just want them to use the Apex monsters more creatively. I think a good idea could be making them invaders. They're pretty tough and they can't be wyvern ridden, so having them act as invasion monsters would ramp up the difficulty and give them a new use. I've wanted to make a video on how bad they are for a while, but it's never really happened for a few reasons, and I probably won't make a video if Sunbreak fixes them. If they stay the same, it means I have more material to work with, so it's a win-win. I've expressed my distaste with the Wirefall in another video of mine, and it's going to return in Sunbreak, seemingly unchanged. I think some balance changes would be great, but a good idea would also be to let us switch it out for another universal Wirebug move as a switch skill. In Monster Hunter Generations, you could equip weapon-specific hunter arts, as well as general arts that work for any weapon. You could give yourself Gore Magala's Virus for an affinity boost, you could equip certain arts that raise your defense or cure statuses, arts that boost healing abilities, or even an art that makes it easier to run away from monsters. The most popular were the evasion arts, Absolute Evasion and Readiness. Evasion had you perform a quick, lengthy evade that had you invincible for its duration, and sheathed your weapon, while Readiness left your weapon unsheathed but restored a little bit of weapon sharpness. Absolute Evasion is likely what the Wirefall evolved from, so one of my hopes is that we could get the other moves. For example, what if I were to switch it out with a move that used up a Wirebug or two in exchange for a temporary attack boost? Or perhaps a different move that raises defense and cures status ailments. This could give players more ways of customizing their moveset and how they approach hunts. It would leave the Wirefall as something even more optional for players who would like to use it, while also providing potentially better alternatives that encourage different playstyles. It's worth mentioning that nobody ever used the other arts in Generations because Evasion and Readiness were just too good, but Wirefall operates differently, and so Capcom could definitely find suitable alternatives. When I first played World, I didn't think much of the investigation system. After all, why would I do these random quests when the optional quests are just fine for the job? When I returned to Iceborne after beating Rise to do some post-game grinding, I finally discovered how good they were. Investigations are random quests you can receive in Monster Hunter World after engaging with the game's research mechanics. These quests have to be registered afterwards, and can have many different attributes. The number of monsters, the maps, the time limit, and the rewards were all randomized, and so there was a lot of variety with what investigations you could receive. But the rewards are what made investigations especially worth it. You could receive bonus materials in different tiers: bronze, silver, and gold, with gold offering the best chance at rare rewards. The result of this is that players could take on investigations of varying challenge and be rewarded for the effort they put in. This rewards skillful players, adds variety to quests, and reduces grinds. The last 2 points are especially important because it's what made me miss them in Rise. I wanted Magdamala's weapons, and so I grinded him a lot in Rise to get his rare drop. Again and again, so many times. But I would never get one, and the quest was in the exact same map with the exact same time of day, every time. I love fighting Magdamala, but it did get a bit tedious. Later on, there was an event quest with a harder Magdamala in a different map with better rewards, which spiced things up, but it was too little too late. And if I grinded this one, I would probably run into the same problem of wishing for variety. So I think Sunbreak would very much benefit from a system like this. It would add quest variety and ease grinding a bit. Because Rise doesn't have tracking, they would have to make some adjustments on how to obtain them, but it could work very well. Sunbreak has title updates confirmed after the launch of the game, where they'll be adding new and returning monsters beyond the expansion's release. Rise also had title updates, but there was a huge problem. You see, Rise launched with the game ending at Thunder Serpent Nawa. No post-game monsters or anything like that. A month later, we got the first title update featuring Teostra, Kushala, and Chameleos, as well as some Apex monsters and Basilgoose. This was obviously content they couldn't finish in time for the game's release. Now, was I angry at this? No, not really. We were dealing with a pandemic, game development is hard, and it was only a month's wait. Regardless, this is not something I want them to do again. So another one of my hopes is actual title updates. Or at least monsters that don't feel like they should have been there from the start. Monster Hunter 4, Generations, and World launched with Kushala and Teostra. If there's a monster you're cutting from the game to release as an update, at least make it somebody who wasn't in the previous game. This might sound a bit unfair because Monster Hunter World had Deviljho as an update, who was in several previous games in a row. But World had an excuse as it was more or less remaking every monster from scratch. In addition to this, World wasn't exactly lacking anything from not having Deviljho at launch, because Basilgoose was present to fulfill that role. Monster Hunter Rise at launch felt extremely empty because there was absolutely nothing to fight post Nawa, and so we had to wait. So while I was not particularly annoyed at how Rise handled its title updates, I hope Sunbreak handles them a lot better. When playing Rise in multiplayer, it's often hard to see what exactly is happening due to all the visual effects happening on the screen. Add palamutes to the mix and the game becomes a mess of bright flashes and sparks. So I hope Sunbreak adds a feature to disable weapon effects from other players. This would make the game much easier to see, especially on a Nintendo Switch and its lower resolution. Those are some of my biggest hopes for Sunbreak. What are yours? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and check out some of my other videos too. Have a good day.